quickly here for a second. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining what is going to be an unbelievably insightful and exciting conversation today. Dr. Ryce has been a mentor of mine. I think when we talked at the interview, Dr. Ryce, I think I figured it was like 14 or 15 years. He's been doing this work for a lot longer than that. He will obviously give us all the details. I found him to be the most insightful expert on forgiveness on the planet, which is why I put that in the description of the class. I don't think you'll find anybody else that understands forgiveness to the extent that he does. And as I do when I work with couples, talk about forgiveness, to me, it is the most significant psychological concept that any of us on the planet could learn. And when we understand the significance of forgiveness on our individual lives, we realize that it has a huge impact on the way we live our everyday lives, not to mention the effect on our marriages. So with that being said, let me just introduce Dr. Ryce, and I'll just hand the microphone over to you, Dr. Ryce. And again, I can't thank you enough for your presence with us today.
Awesome.
And I am certain that everyone's going to find an unbelievable amount of knowledge from today's conversation. Thank you very much.
Delighted to be here.
So it's all yours, my friend. Take away.
All right. Well, welcome to Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And what you can do about it. The more important part is what you can do about it. And what we're going to do is we're going to unfold a synthesis of several different disciplines. You know, Winston Churchill said, "We have the privilege of being separated by a common language." And that's such a true statement, because oftentimes people hear things that are never said and see things happen that never happen, and you wonder how that's even possible. We're going to explain how that's possible as we tie together several different disciplines. We're going to look at science and psychology. We're going to look at some ancient theological ideas. We're going to look at the ancient Aramaic language. We're going to step into some of the medical aspects from the point of view of naturopathic medicine and holistic philosophy. How does this whole energy system called life work together? And what I'm going to invite you to do, if you have any questions that come up for you as I'm presenting, I'm going to ask you to hold those questions, because what I've found is usually the question that somebody has, I'm going to unfold as the presentation unfolds, and I want to unfold it in an order rather than jump out into different places that we're not quite prepared for. So we're going to build an understanding of how the whole energy system works from several different disciplines. What I observed early in my career, which in this work goes back about 50 years, was that when people heard truth, the way it worked in one conceptual language, let's say psychological, they went, wow, that's really cool. But it didn't change their lives. When they heard it from the point of view of physics, when they heard it from the point of view of psychology, when they heard it from the point of view of medicine, when they started to hear it in different conceptual languages, all of a sudden it unfolds into a bigger picture. And that's what we want to have, is this bigger picture. And to make sure we've got the right audience, that we're speaking to the right audience, I'll just ask a couple of questions. Is there anybody in the group that's ever had any conflict in any of your relationships? See a show of hands here, conflict, okay. Hands and feet, two-handers. Okay, we got the right group. That's good. Has anyone, in order to avoid those conflicts, ever taken the geographic cure? You know, we go to the other side of the country where people will be different, and the person that picks you up at the airport finishes the sentence that the person that dropped you off started. How does this work? How do they know what to say to me? Or you enter a new relationship, and the first thing you do is you read the riot act. This is what I will not put up with. And then you wonder why you're living with it. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is something that we have had hidden from us all of our lives. And we bought into and cooperated with that hiding. And what we've had hidden from us is the fact that by nature, we are creators. You and I are creative beings. We literally create everything that happens in our world. That doesn't mean I go out and I assemble it out there. All I have to do is set up the energetic patterns that resonate or invite experiences into my life. And guess who's going to show up? Now, everybody loves this idea of being a creator when the creation's going well. But then when the creation's not going so well, don't we always know who the problem is? And isn't their name? Well, let me tap in here. I'm gonna do one psychic trick in this workshop. I'm gonna tell you exactly the name of the person that has the problem, according to your mind. Is their name by any chance them? If only they'd be different. Do you have somebody, if they'd be different, your life would be just fine, or at least that's what you believe? Well, my offering is that's the biggest lie you could possibly tell yourself. You will notice that if you've been through a particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the only one that was there every time. It's about you. But what happens is we have this expert way of hiding from ourselves. And here's how we hide from ourselves. We deny ownership for what's happening in our lives. When we live in denial, what we do, information from us, I mean literally minds. And in this work, our definition of denial is very specific. Denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of us is the cause of what's moving inside of us. Now, that something out there is the trigger for what's moving inside of us, but the cause of moving inside, what's moving inside of us is inside of us. It's never outside. And we confuse trigger for cause. And so when I say to myself, Bill made me mad, in essence, what I'm telling my mind is, mind, you've got to hide all information from me that I'm responsible for what's happening inside of me. Did you know that you have an evidential mind? There's some interesting Harvard research that tells us that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, that is, there are 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity happening in the brain, the max amount of data that goes into our conscious awareness, the construct of our mind called perception, the max amount of data in that time frame is 9 bits. So we're looking at 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing. And it's been estimated in that same time frame where those 10,000 brain cells are firing, the actuality, what the actual world energetically is made up of, is perhaps as much as 20 trillion bits of data. So for the average person, here we are looking at what perhaps is a 20 trillion bit world through 10,000 brain cells firing within us, and then bringing it down to 9 bits of data. And the evidence we see always follows the instructions we've given to our minds. So if I'm in a painful experience, you know, the title of our workshop, the title of my book is, Why is this happening to me again? And why is it happening again? Because that is inside of me. And when I insist that it's caused from the outside, I have to hide the real cause from myself. So when I say, let's say I'm angry, and I say, Bill made me angry, in essence, what I'm saying to my evidential mind is, mind, you cannot admit into this 9-bit space up here any information that shows me that I've got anything to do with my life. It's all about Bill. And so what happens is, when I deny ownership, again, when I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, then I dissociate from that which is moving within me. And dissociate here means that I cut myself off completely from it. In order to hallucinate, in order to generate a perceptual construct that shows me that the problem is outside of me, I have to cut off access to the real cause, which is inside of me. Again, if you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, sooner or later, you got to recognize that this is what's moving inside of me. So dissociation, it's kind of like, you've got a file on your computer that you're working on, very complex, deep file of information, and you close the file up and you put a password on it, and then you throw away the password. What happens? You can't access that file again until you find the password. Now, you'll notice our whole culture is so steeped in denial that everybody's talking about how everybody else is the cause of what's going on in their lives. Everybody's a victim to everybody else. The people from the very top, whenever things aren't going the way they want it to be going, aren't they talking about how it's somebody else? I'm the poor victim. I mean, we're talking about some of the biggest names in the country and in the world with the supposed biggest bucks, and they're all talking about how they're victims and it's somebody else's fault. That's the epitome of denial, because when we do that, we dissociate from the content of our own minds. We hide it from ourselves. Now, I used to keynote at a conference. This goes back 35, 37 years ago. There's a conference called Global Science, happened out in Colorado, once in a while in Florida. And one year, I was speaking at the conference, and they had a presenter named Marcel Vogel. Marcel Vogel was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. He was the only non-degreed scientist that IBM ever had on their staff. You didn't get on IBM staff unless you were the PhD, the top level graduate. Marcel didn't have a degree. He couldn't get a degree because nobody could teach him anything. At the age of 11, Marcel invented and patented chemical light. You go to a football game and you get a light stick, and there's glass tubes inside of plastic, and you break the glass tubes and the chemicals mix and you get light from it. Marcel invented that when he was 11, and his family didn't have the money to patent it. At 11, Marcel patented that. The only reason your hard drive works in your computer is Marcel, working for IBM, invented the magnetic coating that stores the information on your hard drive. That's the kind of mind Marcel Vogel had. So Marcel shows up at the conference, and he's sharing about a device that he has called a Delaware camera. And what he tells us is that this camera, working differently than your average camera, you click the shutter on a camera, the aperture opens, light energy comes in, it's stored on the photographic plate. This camera is different. There's a tuning mechanism between the aperture and the photographic plate. So if you tune the camera properly and you click the shutter and there's a frequency in front of it that the camera is attuned to, then that's what's registered on the photographic plate. Example. Let's take a picture of, using the Delaware camera, of an acorn. When you tune the camera properly and you take a picture of an acorn, guess what shows up on the photographic plate? An oak tree. Now, people say, wait a minute now, Michael, that's getting a little much. How do you take that's silly. Well, let's think about it. I'm in a room here in Bristol, Virginia right now. And, there are at least probably 1,000 different channels that I could attune to if I had the right frequency device to receive them. And I could be watching perhaps an opera, perhaps a mystery film, perhaps a concert. I could be watching 1,000 different things. I don't happen to have the tuning device for all that right now. So for all intents and purposes, it's not here. Have you ever planted an acorn and gotten a Volkswagen grow out of it, or a tomato, or a stalk of corn? No. If you plant an acorn, you get an oak tree. That's it. You don't get anything else. So think about that logically and think it from the point of view of energy. This work is based in Albert Einstein's statement when he says, "On such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy, energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter." Einstein tells us matter does not exist. You do not live in a material world. You do not have a physical body. We'll explain why it looks that way as we unfold the workshop, but we live in a world of energy. And you need a tuning mechanism for the frequency you're looking at in order to be able to decode it. So Marcel had the camera. Obviously, the oak tree is in the acorn. The instruction set that says, as you plant that acorn in the ground, that says take the water and take the light energy and take the nutrients and build it into something. Obviously, that energetic pattern is in the acorn, and that's what he was able to attune to with this camera. So then he went on to bring us the real crux of the reason he brought the camera, and that was he was able to take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. So when you start to think of this so-called body-mind unit as an energy system rather than as a physical thing, and you realize that when mind energy moves in you, what's moving, what's firing, sets up an energy wave. And every energy wave, when it meets a wave that matches it, transfers some of its energy to the secondary or the receiving system. You know, think about in physics class in high school. You took a middle C tuning fork and you hit it on a desk and you put it in front of a second middle C tuning fork. What happened to the second middle C tuning fork when you put that moving fork in front of it? It started to vibrate. That's called the law of resonance. It's a law of energy exchange. So if I put a middle C tuning fork in front of a middle A tuning fork, what happens to the middle A tuning fork? Absolutely nothing. So if there's something in me that I'm in denial about, and of course, being in denial, I'm pushing it away from myself. If I push something down, what have I done? I've added energy to it. And so, you know, imagine I've got a 3-foot diameter spring sitting here on the floor. Can that spring do anything sitting here on the floor? Nothing. But what if I go over and I push down on that spring and I lock it? And I push down on it again and I lock it. And I push down on it and I push down on it. And I get 2 or 3 of you big guys from the class that come up here and help me. And we really crank that puppy down and lock it each time. And then I let the lock off. What happens? We're going to get an explosion. There's an energy stored there that now is going to begin to move. When people live in denial, they push down, they push down, they push down. They dissociate from those energetic patterns that they don't want to deal with, which means they intensify the energy that they set out into the world. Now, seeing as how the world is energy and the governing rule of energy is resonance, of the millions of people that one could possibly interact with, who's going to respond to what we are sending out into the world except someone who has a match for what we've denied and dissociated from? And the more we've pushed this down, the faster somebody's going to be resonated into our space, the faster someone's going to be attracted into our space. And having hidden certain information from ourselves, when that person opens their mouths, they're going to tend to do something that matches what's resonating in them, what's drawn them to us, and that's going to cause those brain cells to fire in that individual. But remember, this person's in denial and they've dissociated from that content, so they're never going to see it directly, they're never going to see it correctly. But what's going to happen is when this person does the behavior they do, then this content that's been shut down is going to fire, and one is going to build their brain's image of this person outside of them out of what is resonated by that individual. And so the very content that one has dissociated from is going to be used to build their brain's image of another, and they're going to complete the cycle of denial and dissociation by projecting. The very content they don't want to deal with into their brain's image of another. And the other shows up with their problem attached, and they really believe because they can see that it is their problem. And this is the game of projection. Now, the culture generally teaches that projection is taking something that's inside of us and putting it outside of us. That's not accurate. That's externalization. Projection is the act of building pictures in our own minds out of dissociated content and using those pictures to, to build our brain's image of another and to believe that what's showing up inside of us and what we're feeling belongs to somebody else. So the cycle of denial, dissociation, and projection leads us to building pictures in our minds of other people, of the content that's going on inside of us. And that's the reason we're feeling what's happening. When you recognize that, then you got to start to figure out a way to break this whole system down and return to truth, start to open a different space. Now we say, but I see Bill out there, and you know, he really is out there. One of the biggest lies we have ever been told is that our eye can see anything. Now, the whole world says, I open my eyes and I look out there and I see what's happening in the world. There has never been a bigger lie in all of history than that one. You don't see with your eyes. Now, my background's electronics with a side study in physics. Here's what I know about antennas. Is there one-way valves? Your eye is an antenna. It's a receiver for light. Light energy comes into your eye and it carries information. And depending what the content is in your mind, the brain cells you have, that information is going to cause those brain cells to fire, and your brain builds the world that you see. This world, this image-making capability of the human mind is the world of perception. Perception is constructed by the mind. You can no more see out of your eye than you could go over to the antenna on your TV set, pull the wires off the back, and look up inside of them and look out through your antenna and see what's happening in the neighborhood. That's foolish. And it's foolish to believe that you can see with your eyes. Your brain generates the perceptual constructs of your mind. And if your perceptual constructs create pain for you, then you better be about changing the content of your mind rather than trying to fix and change everybody else. And so it's time for us to start on a new path. It's time to recognize that perception is nothing but a construct of the mind. If you've ever been in a courtroom and you listen to 6 different people testify about the accident they were at, you will notice that it's like no 2 of them were at the same accident. How could their realities be so different? Perception is nothing other than a reality in the mind. And then there's actuality. Remember that Harvard research that I talked about? 10,000 brain cells firing? 9 bits of data make up the world that you see. Max, that's it. And it's all an internal construct. So we have a reality going on, each and every one of us, all the time. And then there's actuality. What actually happened. And every person has a perspective on the actuality, and every person's reality is made up from the content of their own minds and produces pictures unique and individual to them. And if we have bought into a world of hostility and fear, then everything you got to start to recognize that everything based in hostility or fear that shows up as a construct in your mind, as a reality, is based in corrupt data. And you better figure out how to get rid of it, or you are going to live the title of my book, the title of this workshop. Why is this happening to me again? Or you may change the title a little bit. Once in a while, we've got a teaching center in the Ozarks in southern Missouri called Heartland, and we'll get a call at Heartland from somebody saying, I understand you have a book. I'd like to get a copy of it. I think it's called Why Are They Doing This to Me Again? Or Why Am I Doing This to Myself Again? We're creators, folks. What happens in your world, you create. If you live in denial, you dissociate from the very content you need to heal. And to understand the principles of healing is a giant leap from living in a world of hostility and fear. And we need to be restored to the truth of who we are. Now, in a world that's gone so far from the truth of who we are, it can be difficult to even find a definition or to come to understand what the truth is of a human being. My offering is that love is not something we do to each other. You can't fall in love. You are love. It's the truth of who you are. And people say, well, define that for me. What does that mean? I haven't found enough words big enough to describe the truth of who we are. However, there is an experiential definition. And I'm going to invite you. Has anybody that's in our audience ever held a newborn child? I'm going to invite you to go back to the moment where you held a newborn. And as you hold that newborn once again, letting go of everything that's going on for you, I remember how powerful it was. I caught both of my own children at home. We had home births, and I caught them in my hands. And the monumental experience of that was profound, and so much was going on inside of me. But right now, just think about that moment where you held a newborn. And if you were to describe the essence of the newborn, what word would you use to describe that? Now, because we're on Zoom, I'm going to bypass because of the time it would take to open everybody's microphone and get them to answer. But this is a question that my wife, Jeannie, and I have asked of tens of thousands of people all over the globe in every culture. And I'm going to put a list over here of the words that people have given us that describe the essence of the newborn. And we get words like sweetness. We get words like awesome presence. I'm going to use a different color marker because that one's not working very well. I get words like truth. I get words like love. And in decades of asking this question of tens of thousands of people, virtually everyone's answer is some variation on the theme of love. Why is that? Because in truth, we all really know what human life is. Human life is the conscious, active presence of love. It's not something we do. It's not something we can do to somebody else. It's what we are. Now, let's take that experience of you holding the newborn one more step. You tap in to the presence of love of the newborn and ask yourself the question, is the newborn loving me, or is the newborn love? And everybody's answer is the same. The newborn. Now, if you go back, and we're going to bring in a theological component, although when I go back to about 40 years ago, I was introduced to the first century Aramaic language. And when I started to hear what was being spoken in that language with my background in electronics, with a side study in physics, I didn't hear theology. I heard physics. I heard physiology. I had been into naturopathic medicine at that time. I heard medical knowledge. I heard what's going on physiologically. I heard genetic information. The Aramaic, interestingly enough, and I'm going to invite you to extract all religious ideas. You've got anything to do with the Aramaic, but it's the root language of at least 5 of the world's major religions. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is not that it's about theology. The reason is because the language is based in physics and physiology, and it describes the truth of life. And when you recognize that it describes the truth of life, then you realize that each of these religions that came out of that language was describing truth, and there was enough truth there for that teaching, for that understanding to grow and expand. But sadly, it oftentimes gets lost in creation. In this Western culture, we often hear the teachings of this man named Yeshua. His Aramaic name was Yeshua. The Greeks named him Jesus, but that's not his name at all. Actually, if you're introducing a Jewish rabbi into the Greco-Roman world, you got to figure out a name that's going to be acceptable. And Jesus, if you break it down, is Jesus. Hail Zeus is what it means. And everybody in the Greco-Roman world knew Zeus, so hey, that's what they called him. But the man actually spoke Aramaic. He thought in Aramaic. He taught in Aramaic, as did Baha'u'llah, another source of the Baha'i faith, as did Zoroaster, an ancient religious tradition, as did Muhammad, another ancient tradition. It's suspected that the Buddha also spoke Aramaic, as did all of the Old Testament prophets and wisdom keepers. They all spoke Aramaic. If the man Yeshua sat in most churches today in the Western world, he'd say that's all Greek to me, because his Aramaic meanings have been lost. So I'm not going to talk about theology here, though I'm going to bring quotes in from the Aramaic and look at what the Aramaic words meant in that context. And as we do that, it starts to open up a whole different perspective on what was being taught. And in particular, it opens a whole new idea of forgiveness. If my mind is in denial and dissociation, and I'm blaming Bill for my hate, and Bill for my fear, and Bill for my rage, is there anything at all for me to forgive Bill for? Absolutely nothing. And if somebody comes along and tells you to forgive somebody else or to forgive yourself, they're not talking about forgiveness. They're talking about a Greek idea of pardoning. When you understand actual forgiveness, you will never say forgive them again. Don't ever forgive your spouse. Don't ever forgive your children. Don't ever forgive your parents. Don't ever forgive yourself, because it's foolish. You can't. A Greek idea of pardoning has been stuffed down our throats and been called forgiveness. I let you off the hook. Let's imagine I've got something painful I'm in denial of in me. And I get 7.5 billion people in the world to walk by my door and shake my hand, and I say to them, I forgive you, I forgive you. I forgive 7.5 billion people. Have I done one thing to touch what's happening inside of me? Never forgive anyone ever again, but forgive continuously in your life. If you're in any kind of pain or turmoil or trauma, especially in the context of your family and your marriage. If you're in pain, guess what? Your physiology is signaling that there's something in you that needs to be removed. Start to think of forgiveness as removal, and now you're talking about actual forgiveness. But most people live in their hostility and fear-based world, and somebody told them they had to let somebody off the hook for that. And they've done it over and over and over again, but you never change the core of what's going on in your mind while you're talking about, thinking about, even referring to forgiving somebody else. You know, all the people who I invite them to this workshop and tell them, you know, I'm doing this workshop on forgiveness. I'll say, you know, I don't need to do that. I've already forgiven my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, my kids, my neighbors, my boss, my former boss. I've forgiven my wife. I forgave my former wife. I've even forgiven my future wives. Guess what I know about that person? That person to date has done zero forgiveness work. If you're still talking about how you forgave somebody for what was going on inside of you, you're talking about pardoning. You've done no forgiveness work. There is no forgiveness in that. What you want to do is you want to learn a tool with which you collapse the projected perceptual construct of your mind that takes your hostility, fear, or negativity and puts it into your brain's image of other. You better learn how to collapse that. And when you collapse that, what happens is you get to drop into the hidden part of your own mind. And when you introduce the hidden part of your mind to active present love, guess what? The transmutation of energy happens and you heal. And that healing, that removal is actual forgiveness work. Now, most of the world's playing this game of hostility and fear, and it's all somebody else's fault. If you recognize that that's what you've been doing, then it's time to take ownership. You know, have you ever run into somebody that, quote unquote, makes you mad? Well, I'm going to start another list over here on this side of the board, and I'm going to put mad. And then we have people who say, yes, and he makes me so sad. And he makes me so afraid. And he makes me so terrified. Guess what? We could carry this list on. Usually I'll ask the question and we'll have a conversation, but this is enough of a sample. If you look at people in their hostility and fear, then everything that goes on this side of the board when they're in that blame game is some variation on that hostility and fear theme. And all hostility and fear says, all that hostility and fear does is it tells you that your perception is being constructed out of corrupt data. Everything that we could put on this side of the board that would be the opposite of this active present love is corrupt data. And when your mind is building a construct, a perceptual construct out of hostility or fear, it's building it out of corrupt data. You don't have to know anything else about a circumstance to know that your mind is lying to you. All you have to know is that your physiology is signaling some form of hostility or fear, and you know that whatever the construct in the mind is, it's a lie. And we need to know how to. And, you know, these lies for many people have been going on for generations and generations and generations. Now, when you think about this idea of the body-mind unit being an energy system, you know, relative to this energy system, there are two qualities of energy. There's that which builds the system up. It's called integrative energy. And there's that which tears the system down. It's called disintegrative energy. Wherever disintegrative energy, corrupt data, anything from this right side of the board is stored in a cell, and the mind functions through every cell in the body. The mind isn't localized in the brain. So wherever this disintegrative energy is stored, it interferes with the function of the cell. You know, if we go to the opening words in the book of John, where we're told it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. That's a total and complete mistranslation from the Aramaic. In the Aramaic, what those words say is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Now, if you go into a cell biologist laboratory today, they'll tell you, here's how it works. When you think a thought, that thought becomes a molecule in your body. Something non-physical, a thought, becomes a neuropeptide. That neuropeptide circulates around in your structure until it finds a receptor site that matches, and it lands on the receptor site on the cell. So a thought produces a molecule. The neuropeptide, the molecule, circulates around until it finds a cell with a receptor site. Now, if we were to look at that energy, that neuropeptide landing on the cell's receptor site, and we were looking inside the cell, we would see this energy entering the cell. It inserts itself in the cell. And what we would call that energy entering inside the cell, we'd say that's chemistry. Now, there's no such thing as chemistry because there's nothing physical, it's all energy. But in our limited senses, that entering the cell is what we call chemistry. And if the chemistry is of a disintegrative nature, if that neuropeptide is of a disintegrative nature, then it's inserting a disintegrative energy in the cell. And guess what? Now we've got, because of the thoughts we think, a dis-ease cell. We've got a cell that becomes physiologically distorted and diseased. My offering is, there is no other cause of disease than that in the human realm. Now, many people say they know better. No, Michael, you just don't understand. These things called bacteria and viruses, they're what cause diseases. Well, you know, there's an industry that's making mega bucks out of that lie, and they're promoting the hell out of it, spend a lot of money to prove it. In 30 seconds, I can prove that's a lie. Let's imagine, you know, we're going to go outside the window here, or a classroom, and let's imagine we've got a 1 acre lot. It spreads out in front of us, beautiful grassy lot. And I'm going to rope off 1 square foot in this corner of the lot. And then I'm going to go to the far opposite corner of the acre, and I'm going to rope off another square foot. And I'm going to count how many bacteria, how many viruses, how many bugs, how many creepy crawly things, how many seagulls and buzzards there are around this square foot. And I'm going to go over to the other corner, and I'm going to count how many. Is there going to be a difference? No, it's pretty much going to be the same. But let's imagine I take a dead rabbit and I put it on that corner over there. And let's say it's nice and warm, it's 98.6 degrees, and I leave the dead rabbit there for a couple of days. And I come back, and I do a count once again of how many creepy, crawly things, bugs and buzzards there are in this corner, and I do a count over there where the dead rabbit is. Is there going to be an elevated count somewhere? 100, absolutely 100% of the time, where's the elevated count going to be of the bacteria, the viruses, the bugs, and the buzzards? It's going to be where the decaying flesh is. If you put mind energy that is of a disintegrative nature into your cells, you just created decaying flesh. You just created a food supply for the bugs and the buzzards. And if you feed them, they will come. Now, how many believe that if I kill off over there all the bugs and the buzzards, the bacteria and the viruses, the rabbit's going to get up and run around again? Not going to happen. Where there is decaying flesh, the creation has a cleanup crew. Now, I don't care if you're out in the savannah in Africa, if there's a weak buffalo, guess what? There's a lion that's going to eat. It's a cleanup crew. It's called a reducer organism. The bacteria and the virus that we've been trained to be so afraid of and go out and buy drugs to shut them down, which further weakens and decays the tissue. That's why people, once they start on those things, every drug is a disease disguised as a cure. You'll notice that if you open the label inside of the package, it'll tell you all the diseases that are caused by this substance compared to that substance. Why is that? Because every one of those things is a disease disguised as a cure. In order to patent them and turn them into drugs, they are unnatural molecules. They do not belong within the human system. Now, does that mean that you can't change some symptoms with it? No, it doesn't mean you can't change the symptoms. I mean, I can go over there where that dead rabbit is and all those bugs and buzzards. I can spray some poisons on them and the buzzards will die and the bacteria will die and the virus will become inactive. There's nothing alive about a virus, but the rabbit's not coming back to life. In fact, I just added more toxicity to the tissue. That's why once you start on one drug, you're on a downward run, because there is no such thing as a body. You know, somebody who's got a headache is not someone whose body lacks aspirin. Aspirin might kill off the sensation of the headache, but there is no lack of aspirin. And when you take that aspirin in, you just created a dis-ease within the structure because you added an energy that's of a disintegrative nature. Remember, there are two qualities of energy relative to this integrated energy system. There is the integrative, that which builds it up, and the disintegrative. Now, it's interesting. In the ancient Aramaic language, there's a word that describes disintegrative energy. Here's where we're getting into the fact of what they understood in the Aramaic language about physiology. Guess what the word for disintegrative energy is? It's the word sin. Now, I know the Greeks have made a big deal of this one. They want you to buy it as your identity, and it's some terrible, awful, evil thing that you've done. But in Aramaic, it's an archery term. If I'm on the archery range and I pull up my bow and arrow and I fire at the bullseye and I miss the bullseye, the scorekeeper yells, "Sin, you're off the mark." That's all it means. Those who engage in hostility or fear are engaging in energies that are off the mark. It is sin. And guess what happens if you do enough of this? You create so much disease within your structure that you die. It's just physiology. When they said the wages of sin is, I can remember being a kid and told that I was like, oh, God's going to get me for my sins. No, it's physiology. You put enough disintegrative energy in, you get enough disintegrative chemistry going in an organ, it's going to start to dysfunction and become ill. You get enough of organs becoming dysfunctional and the body can't function anymore and people die. It's all about how energy works. It's got nothing to do with theology. It's just, here's how the system works. And you might remember, let's go just one more step into this understanding from the Aramaic. You might remember that they said, the sins of the fathers will be passed on to 3 and 4 generations. What does that mean? That means that when my great, 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 great grandfather had a thought that came from this side of the board that was off the mark, and it was stored somewhere in his physiology. It not only was stored in the cells, but it was stored in the genes. And it was passed on to his son and his son and his son, and finally to me. And I have that thought disorder. I have that mind energy in my cellular structure. And if I'm ever going to be free of the deteriorating effects of it, I'm going to have to learn how to get rid of that. Now, did anybody ever tell you, this is the understanding from the Aramaic. Did anybody ever tell you that you have in your structure, in your genes, in your physiology, every thought, every feeling, every reality structured in the previous 4 generations of your bloodline? Did anybody ever tell you that? Did anybody ever tell you there was a way to clean that up? Did anybody ever tell you that forgiveness was a tool for going in and accessing these things and removing them from the structure so that we could be freed of that? Did anybody tell you that? No, because they didn't understand. Again, he'd say, it's all Greek to me. Now, when you realize and you go back and you say, well, where did the 4th generation back get their thoughts, their feelings, their energetic patterns? But from the previous 4, who got it from the previous 4, who got it from the previous 4. Do the count. Sit down and do the math. Start with yourself, 1, and then double it for the next generation, 2, then 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. You know what happens by the time you get back just 30 generations? You know how many people you've got in your bloodline? You know how much mind energy you've got from how many people? There are 1.6 billion people in just 30 generations of each of our lineage. And sooner or later, we got to stop this medical game of, well, they had cancer, they had the ABC disease, therefore you're going to have it, because it's all a lie. But if you get fed the mind energy for that and you believe it, then you can activate the gene for cancer. You can activate the gene for heart disease. You can activate the gene for anything, because all it is energy, and energy is activated through resonance. And the main resonator is your mind. Your thoughts produce results in your physiology. And it's time for us to wake up. Where is this mind energy stored? Well, it's interesting. If you took a body and you broke it down into all its components and you got yourself a physiologist or a physicist to do an assessment, you know what they tell you your body is made of, the base element is? The base element, they will tell you, is carbon. That's what stores this mind energy, generation upon generation upon generation. Now, does anybody know how many electrons there are in a carbon atom? Now, they can manipulate them, and there are different structures of carbon, but the base element of carbon has, you might recognize this number, it has 6 electrons, it has 6 protons, it has 6 neutrons. Now, factually, I would offer that this state of being that you're designed to live in, which is love, was what in the ancient teachings was called the mind of Christ. You are designed to live out of the mind of love. Hold a newborn. It's clear who they are. And our culture specializes in knocking the love out of us and then sending us off to find somebody to love. I've got some really bad news. And I've got some really good news. Nobody has ever loved you. Nobody is ever going to love you. You do not love anyone, and you never have, and you never will. Love is not something you do. Love is what you are. You are this mind. You are the active presence of love. And somebody lied to you and told you you were something else. Somebody gave you false ideas about you from this side of the board because that's what was given to them. And we need to go in and clean up the generations. Remember that story in the ancient scriptures before correction came? There's a story about this group of people. Now, this is a pretty bright group of people. And if you look in their writings, you can see that they understood astronomy very well. But what they told us was that they got lost in this hot, sandy place for 40 years. Now, let's think about that logically for a minute. If you and I got lost in the middle of that desert, it's about a 35 square mile area, and we knew about astronomy, we know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, what would we do? We'd get up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to get out of this desert, I'm going to head west, and 35 miles. It wouldn't be very long before you're out of the desert. That story wasn't about being lost in a hot. And you notice that the average person, before they start to scratch their heads and go, you know, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. I'm the only one that was there every time. Maybe this is about me. And they start to wake up and start to suspect that maybe it isn't everybody else that they've projected on. They start to wake up and go, oh my God, this is mine. And then they start to realize that the energy of intimacy within the context of marriage means that we exchange genetics with the person. And now this person has access to parts of me that I don't have access to. And they become expert at resonating it in me. And what that means is they know exactly what to show me that I need to heal. And I become expert at showing it to them. We do another workshop called Healing Through Relationships, where we get into that dynamic and why these relationships that start out so wonderful become so crazy. Because if you resonate, if you're my partner and you resonate my sadness, and I say, you made me so mad, I just took my sadness into my brain's image of you. And now every time I'm around you, I'm going to be sad. And then if you resonate my mad part and I say, and you made me so mad, I hook my brain's image into my mad part. And now every time around you, I'm mad. It isn't you that I reject. It isn't you that I fell out of love with. It's that I've hooked everything I've denied and dissociated from and blamed you for into my brain's image of you. And now you show up with all that attached. And I think you're the problem in my life. And sooner or later, we got to wake up and start to realize that we need to learn how to collapse these false images that we project into our brain's image of our partners, of our friends, of our enemies even. When you realize that, everything begins to change. And what we're looking to do with this work is to make available the power and the tools for making the changes that move us into a space where we literally remove the carbon-based memory, hostilities and fears of the generations. We forgive. You apply forgiveness to remove content from your mind. You never apply forgiveness to someone else. You remember they said, you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother. Now, that's not a bleeding heart statement. In the ancient Aramaic, that word heart would be the unconscious. Remember they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life? You notice they didn't say take care of the other person. They said take care of what's in your heart, what's in your unconscious, what you've denied and dissociated from and hidden from yourself. That's what you need to take care of, because that's where the issues come from. Oh yeah, when we use that to build our brain image of everybody and everything else, it looks like it's all out there, but it ain't out there. That's why you're feeling it. Actually, it's a story I tell. My wife loves to hear me tell. It's one of her most favorite stories. And of course, she'd be going, right now, because she knows the story I'm going to tell and she hates it. But it's a story about the woman who loves movies. And she hears about this new movie coming to town. And she leaves early so she can get up there in the front seat. You know, she's a little hard of hearing. She doesn't see very well, but she just loves these movies. Well, there's a big traffic snarl up and she gets to the theater late. And she gets into the theater, but ends up in the very back row. And in front of her, there's this young couple, and this couple, you know, they're laughing hysterically. They're just distracting. She can hardly see over them. She can hardly hear. And finally, she reaches over the seat. She jabs this young girl who's just hysterically laughing, jabs her on the shoulder, says, young lady, are you feeling hysterical? And the girl's kind of shocked. At first, she's not sure what to say. And finally, she turns, she says, well, he was feeling mine first. You can't feel anybody else's. If you're feeling it, it's your mind energy that's causing it. And if you don't learn to forgive, then you're going to find somebody else, if you haven't noticed, and somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else. Sooner or later, you must acquire the skill of forgiveness. You must acquire the skill with which you collapse the projected images from the dissociated mind. You open the dissociated mind. What was that called in the ancient teachings? Remember they said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain? And churchianity told us that was a purple curtain in the church. I'd offered this is the temple. The veil is the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious. You got to open that puppy. And you open it through forgiveness. And what forgiveness does is it collapses these projected lies, these projected images that make what's going on inside of us look like it belongs to someone else. It drops into those hidden parts of the mind, and we get to access the hidden parts, the unconscious, the desert, directly. When you bring what's in your own desert, your own unconscious forward in the presence of active love, rather than in hostility or fear, when love is conscious, active, and present in you, and you bring that underlying information forward, then the exposure to active love creates literally a transmutation of energy, a shift, a change in the energy that is not anything rational that anybody could understand or explain, except that conscious, active, present love, the truth of who you are. If you can keep it present in your mind while you access your own dissociated or your own unconscious data, what's stored in carbon-based memory, what perhaps started, generations ago, when you access those things in the presence of love, then by exposure to love, the energetic patterns of hostility and fear, of hate, of rage, of guilt, of pain, of trauma dissolve. And because the true nature of every one of us is exactly the same, when we hold to that space of active love, we get to return to the truth of who we are, and the people around us do the same thing. Now, they may not move at the same pace. They may not have the same willingness that we do. But if you stand as active present love and you're committed to that, no matter what anybody else is doing, if you're going to hold to the truth of what your created essence is as that newborn presence of love, because the world is a world of resonance, it's going to set up a similar energy in everybody around you, because we're all made of the same stuff. Now, if somebody's got some thick, dense layers of hostility or fear, it might take some time for that love to start to peek through, for it to start to break through the rage and the guilt and the grief and the pain. And the healing process is not a Dr. Feelgood process. It takes time to undo what never belonged within the structure. And what I'm going to do at this point is because the mind can only absorb what the bladder can hold, is we're going to take a short intermission, give everybody a chance to empty their bladders, take about maybe 15 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll start to look at what the solution is to this dilemma. How do you collapse these perceptual constructs, realities in the mind, access the underlying energy, and move through the generational patterns? So let's take an intermission and we'll come back and we'll step into a worksheet process. There should have been, by the way, a link for you to go to the worksheet on our website. If you haven't downloaded that, if you look at the flyer, there's a link there. You might want to download that so you'll be able to fill in the worksheet as we go step by step through that in the next part of the workshop. So let's take a short intermission.
And Jeannie just put the link in the chat.
Great idea. And we'll do a couple of question and answers when we come back. False construct of the mind. So welcome back to Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Delighted you're here. In the first half, we laid out a basic foundation for this process. And now in the second half, we're going to look at the tool. And the tool, key here to recognize, once again, I'm going to reinforce, you've never seen anything with your eyes. Your brain sees. What your brain sees is a construct that comes from the content of your mind. If there's pain content in your mind, then you're going to be in pain. And if that pain content is used to build your brain's image of someone else, if you project it into your brain's image of someone else, it's going to look in your mind. Your reality is going to show you that what you're experiencing really truly belongs to them. But again, I remind you, you're feeling it. Perception is a construct, and perception has a quality. If you're always in hostility or fear and blaming everybody else, then the quality of your perception is at a 1 or a 2, and it means you're not very smart. You're not very emotionally smart. You're a tough person to be around because it's always everybody else's fault for how you feel. What we're going to show you is precisely how or what drives this perceptual construct that results from denial and dissociation, how to collapse it, and how to access the underlying data, bring that underlying data forward in the presence of love and begin its dissolution. It is a process. We're going to lay out the process. You can go to our website, WhyAgain.org, just like the title of my book or the title of this workshop, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? WhyAgain.org. You can download this worksheet for free from the website. And there are actually several different versions. Each worksheet has the core of the forgiveness process. And each worksheet, for 40 years, I've been developing this worksheet. It actually hasn't changed much in the last 2 or 3 years. But prior to that, I would sometimes make 12 changes in a day as I was refining and understanding this process. When I first show you what the key way is, you're going to go, that's really stupid, because it looks really stupid. And I'll offer that, I taught this process. Sometimes I did this particular workshop as many as 3 times in a day. And I taught it over a period of literally 35 years before I was able to melt from the Aramaic exactly what forgiveness means. Let me share it with you now. Forgiveness is a tool with which you collapse the false constructs of your mind. You open a pathway into the underlying dissociated pain. You bring that pain forward in the presence of active love for dissolution. If you never do that, then what happens is your mind generates image after image of person after person causing your pain. But remember, you can't feel anybody else's. So you can download the worksheet from the website. Many different versions. I suggested people try the different versions because there are shades of ideas different in each one. And actually, we've got some people who, have been around this work for years, and they'll shift. We'll change worksheets every week or two just to get the variety of the different nuances of each worksheet. So you can download, you can do the process right there on the website, WhyAgain.org. You can download the worksheet, print it on your own printer so you can do it, or you can go to your app store on your phone, type in the words Heartland, one word, Heartland, Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. When you do that, you'll be looking at the world's only forgiveness app. You can download that app free. The app was purposely made to be very private. It will only ask for one permission. It's not going to ask if it can use your dialer or change your settings or send texts or take pictures, or it's not going to ask for any. One thing it's going to ask is, I want to use the internet to be able to operate. That's its only permission. We purposely made it very private because people do some very private, some very deep personal work with this worksheet process. When you complete the process in the app, you can save it as a PDF to your phone. And it's going to ask for one more permission if you do that. And of course, it's got to be able to write to your drive. Otherwise, there are no permissions. It's a totally private app. So you can download that from your app store, whether you've got an iPhone or an Android, doesn't matter. Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. Also, 5 days a week, an hour a day from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern Time, Jeannie and I do a radio show. The radio show's been going on for 11 years. There are, I don't know, thousands, 4,000 hours in the archives you can go back and listen to. And the conversation that's been going on 5 days a week for 11 years is this one. How does this work? That's how in-depth, that's how deep it goes. When you start realizing you're going back to grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and cleaning up these dynamics within your genes and within your physiology, it's a pretty deep conversation. So 5 days a week, you can listen to the radio show. It's an internet show on Blog Talk Radio, so you can listen on your computer. Or because most people have free long distance on their phones, most people call into the show and listen to the show on their phones. I suggest you save the number to your phone. The call-in number for the show is 563-999-3581. Put in your phone with a reminder to call, a minute or two to one, and you're listening to the show. And if you have questions, we are there to answer those questions. We want your questions. There are no silly questions. Any question you've got about this process, about these tools, and this is one tool of a whole series. There are about 30 different significant tools that we teach that all come out of this first century Aramaic forgiveness process. So you can call the show and you can ask for support in that. Also, an hour earlier from noon to 1 o'clock, there's a psychologist, Dr. Tim Hayes, who's been a clinical psychologist for 47 or 48 years now, began to do this work about 18 years ago. For several years, he was kind of a co-host on the show, and then he started his own show. So the first hour of Mind Shifters Radio, you can call into that same number. You can listen to Dr. Tim and ask him questions. The second hour, Jeannie and I, 5 days a week from 1 till 2 o'clock, we'd be delighted to have a conversation with you. Also, if you download the app, and let's say you're doing step 3 in the worksheet, and you go, God, I don't remember what this is about. There's a button on every page of the app that you can just click and send us a question. Jeannie will get that emailed question. We'll answer it on the show. She'll ask it on the show. We'll answer it. We'll send you back an email telling you where the archive is, where you can pick up that show and get the answer. So we're doing everything that we can possibly do to make these tools available, and we would love your support. Pass it on, share it with someone else if you find it meaningful. There are at least 20 different radio shows where either Dr. Tim or myself or Jeannie has walked somebody through the whole worksheet process. So in the archives of the radio show, if you go to our website, WhyAgain.org, click the microphone, you can drill down to the radio shows. And there's a section where there are about 20 different shows where we've actually walked somebody through the whole process. And of course, each different worksheet with a different person is a whole different experience. And so the nuances are there in each one of those worksheets for you to listen to. There are also some videos. We have a YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and just type in Michael, R-Y-C-E, you'll see one she said, well, you know, I've never actually contacted. So we're back on. So Yinka contacted me, and so the second and fourth Thursday of each month at 3:30 in the afternoon Eastern Time. It's 8:30 in London, England, where the book study is. But at 3:30, you can tap in. There's a link on the website. If you look at events on our website, there's a link there, and you can be part of that book study. And we're going through the whole book. We've done several, I think 3 worksheets with people now. They'll be in the archives as well. So we're here to make this as available as we can possibly make it. So what I'd like to do, and we'll ask you if you would, if you have a question, to open your mic. And then when you're finished, close your mic so we don't get feedback. So we've created a foundation. Does anyone have any questions? And I don't want to get into questions about what's going on in your life and how can you fix it. That's the worksheet's going to be about that. But any questions relative to what I've presented, anything that needs to be clarified to move on to the next step in understanding the tools. So does anyone have any questions? If you raise a hand, I think there's a button down near the bottom of your screen where you can raise a hand and ask a question. If not, we'll just move forward. All right. So we asked everybody to go ahead and download a worksheet, so you had a copy of it. And as we go, Ginny will put it up on the screen. It's actually a PowerPoint that Yinka created. So thank you, Yinka, for doing that. So this is the step-by-step. This is the 7-step worksheet. We have a 12-step. We have an 11-step. There's several different ones over 40 years of teaching this that I've used. And I'll just offer that in order to explain to you what I explained in this first hour, working with the Aramaic. And I understand why the Greeks turned forgiveness into pardoning, letting other people off the hook. But until you understand how the mind works energetically, until you understand how perception works, until you understand how physics works, it's hard to make sense of what this physicist from 2,000 years ago taught. What this psychologist from 2,000 years ago said, here's how it works. And you'll remember he said, he called perception, he said, don't judge by appearances. Perception are just constructs of the mind. They are appearances. If you fall into those, you'll be looking at the content of your own mind projected into your brain's image of someone else, and you'll be sure that everybody else is the problem in your life. Again, I remind you, if you've been through that problem 87 different times with 42 different people, you are the only one that was there every time. It's about you. It's not about anybody else but you. All of the work means you have to go inside and change the dynamics in here. Now, sometimes those dynamics don't change easily. In fact, if you go back into the ancient teachings where they're talking about forgiveness to this man, Yeshua, one of the disciples says, well, how many times do I have to forgive my brother? Is 7 times enough? Like, is 7 worksheets enough? The Greeks tell us he responded and said, no, 77 or 7 times 70. In Aramaic, it's actually 77 times 70. Here's what's going to happen. The patterns that have come through your physiology, your genes, your genetics, are perhaps going to, you're going to work on that particular issue time after time after time until you have the full-blown vitality to be able to process through, access, and remove those deeper traumas that perhaps have been going on for generations. So you may do many worksheets around any given issue, and you'll visit it from different places at different times as you work through that process. So if we look at the worksheet at the very top on the left, you'll see where it says reality management. My reality equals perception, an internal construct of my mind. So that's my reality. And then on the right-hand side at the top of the page, you'll see forgiveness, the tool for waking up from and changing my reality. Change your mind, change your life. Here's the how-to of Aramaic forgiveness. Now, the very first thought at the top of the page is a premise. My essential nature, here's the acknowledgement of who you are. My essential nature, my human life, my very being is love. If you ever forget that, just hold a newborn. We've been convinced of a lie that that's not who we are. You might remember this man, Yeshua, 2,000 years ago, said, in order for you to live, you've got to die. That's what he's talking about. The self, the false self based in corrupt data of hostility or fear, has to go. It has to be removed. It has to be forgiven, but not forgiven in the Greek sense. Oh, it has to be let off the hook. We have people driving around with bumper stickers saying, I've been forgiven, like I've been let off the hook. Now I can do anything I want. Excuse me? If you engage in disintegrative energy, you're going to die. That's just the way it is. There's no such thing as being forgiven as in being let off the hook. It's a totally false idea. It's about removal of what never belonged in physiology. So my very being is love. Hold a newborn if you forget. The goal of this internal forgiveness wake-up sheet is to empower me to remove fear and or hostility and return to the direct experience of love 24/7, 365. That's where we want to go with this worksheet. How many times are you going to have to do it around any given issue? I don't know. I'll just offer this. I started developing this work 50 years ago. I'm doing it just a little better than 50 years. About 40 years ago, after becoming a physician, I was introduced to the Aramaic. And it clicked in my brain, this isn't religion, this isn't theology, this is physics, it's physiology, it's psychology, it's genetics. He knew exactly how the whole system worked. And that began the process for me. I'll just offer that here I am now, 40 years after being introduced to this. And I'll just say that the last 2 years for me, and I'm talking about, I've been doing this full time for the Aramaic part for over 40 years. The last 2 years for me is where I've done some of the deepest and most important work that I've done. So be patient with yourself. It takes time. You know, we'll talk about what we call the vitality meter in a while. It takes time to get to the level of vitality where you can even start to access the underlying energetic dynamics. Because if you're not at a level of vitality where you could deal with it, literally accessing those things could be deadly. So this is the process of developing the vitality and the strength to be able to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to put the pen to the paper and actually do a worksheet. I'm going to do one up here on the board that came from working with a woman who had a problem with her boss. So I'm going to do that worksheet as an outline, and I'm going to invite you to do the process, fill in the blanks as we go along and start to build the brain cells for how the process is done. So number 1A, and you want to put your name in the first blank there. So I'm going to do some work that came from working with a woman whose name was Sally. So number 1A, Sally. So I, Sally, who am love. So if you've maybe never done this before, in fact, maybe you'll have some trepidation about it because somebody said, oh, if you proclaim yourself good, then you're in trouble. It's a lot of that old churchianity fear stuff. It's time to get rid of that. You got to acknowledge you need to start with knowing who you are and know that a self in you, that's a false self, is going to disappear. It's going to be removed. And that can be experienced as a traumatic thing. That can be experienced as a death. So be aware that that may happen, or pardon me, it is going to happen over time. So I, Sally, who am love, am experiencing, in number 1B, what we want you to do is identify your emotions. So acknowledge who you are, and then around the situation, just pick a situation that you're going to do some work around. And for Sally, in 1B, she's experiencing anger. And I'm going to put it over here. She's experiencing some fear. The reason I'm putting it over here is that each emotion is a reflection of a particular thought disorder. It's a reflection of a particular disintegrative quality of energy. So you might have 10 feelings that come up, or pardon me, 10 emotions that come up around any given issue. If you have 10 different emotions about an issue, that means there are 10 different thought disorders that need to be forgiven. And so you do one on each emotion that's present. So we're just going to do the anger here, and for example's sake, I'm going to just do this stuff here over here on the side. So identify what it is that you're feeling in that situation. And then it says, use a separate worksheet for each emotion. Hostility and fear are from internal corrupt data and indicate my use of sustained incoherence to build this disturbing internal construct. Now, you see there's an asterisk on the word sustained incoherence. If you look down at the bottom of the worksheet, you'll see that there are definitions for new ideas that we introduce. Sustained incoherence is a term that was initiated by a physicist named David Bohm. David Bohm was a genius. He actually worked with Einstein for a time period. He actually helped to do the math that enabled them to build the atomic bomb. He also worked in the realm of psychology. So this guy was genius. And here was his assessment of what's going on for humans. We, with our own mind energy, create problems in our lives. We hide those problems, as we talked about here. We deny, we blame somebody else, we dissociate, we project it. So with our own thoughts, we create the problems in our lives, and we refuse to own that we're creating our problems, and we go on thinking the same way. David Bohm called that sustained incoherence. It's an incoherent energy, sin, an energy that's off the mark, that doesn't belong within the human system. So what we're going to do is we're going to face the sustained incoherence. Now, one of I do a workshop called Codependence to Interdependence. Actually, we're going to do another interview with Tim. I think it's on the 20th. And the title of it is what's driving your marriage. And we're going to look at a process that I've developed called the power person dynamic in our codependence work. And in that codependence work, what we recognize is that whenever I'm in the game of blame with somebody else, then I'm pretending that somebody else is the problem in my life. And as I do that, I'm hiding from myself what it is that I need to deal with. And one of the things we point out in this codependence to interdependence workshop is what I call the pseudo solutions of the non-being mind. There are about a dozen of them. The number one pseudo solution is if I could just figure this out. Now, whatever our audience is, if we're working with an audience of 1,000 people, if I were to get everybody to shout out their age, subtract 5 years for each of them, I would have exactly the number of years that 1,000 people as a collective group have been trying to figure it out. My offering is, I don't care what's happening in your life, you can't figure it out. You can't ever touch into, and with this 9-bit mind up here, this little intellect, ever figure out what happened in 4 generations that's been reinforced in 31 different lives to be passed on to you, that pulled in the person that you're playing it out with and the dynamics that are going on. You're never going to figure those energetic dynamics out. But whatever the reality is, whatever the perceptual construct is, you can always collapse it. And when you collapse it, what happens is this false picture collapses in on itself, and it opens literally a pathway into the unconscious mind. You've now got direct access to what's in the unconscious. Now, sometimes when you're doing a worksheet, that's going to be full cognitive awareness. Oh, I had this memory of something that happened when I was 2. Sometimes. Other times, it's not going to be cognitive. You'll just be in the energetic process of moving through it. You know, in psychology, it's pretty much recognized you have to be able to go back and deal with what happened in your life. And we've been taught that that's a function of memory. So we'll get people who go lay on the couch for 25 years and they'll get all the questions and then they'll try to figure it out, and you can't figure it out. I'd offer that returning your mind to the point where the thought disorder was installed and happened is not a function of memory, it's a function of forgiveness. When you collapse that construct, you get to access the underlying dynamic. And the underlying dynamic might be 10 generations old, might be 20 generations old. And when you start realizing the magnificence of this one human form, the processing power, the storage capacity is beyond any comprehension. I mean, we could literally take every giant Cray supercomputer in the world, chain them all together, and we wouldn't have the processing power and the storage power of one human form. All of the generations are in there. 30 lives, or 30 generations, 1.6 billion people. And you're never going to figure that out. But when you learn how to collapse perception, when you learn how to collapse these constructs, and you allow that pathway to be open within you, and a key to that pathway opening is to keep your breath moving. When they said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain, again, that wasn't a purple curtain in a church. It's a veil between the subconscious and the unconscious. That veil's built by holding the breath. You'll notice that people in trauma hold their breath. You open the veil by breathing. And you'll notice there's several places in the worksheet, there's a reminder to breathe. Because without the movement of the breath, you won't get to the root of the thought disorder that needs to be brought forward in the presence of love. So this returning to the event that happened, bang. And I've been doing this process with people for 40 years. We actually had this conversation yesterday afternoon. We did the book study of in England last night with Yinka. And we were both amazed, or speaking of our amazement, Yinka had shared that she's been doing worksheets with people, how amazed she was at what people just pop into and what she's popped into with it. 40 years of doing it, it always amazes me what people drop into that not necessarily becomes cognitive, but oftentimes becomes cognitive and gives a chance to process through it. So this disturbing internal construct is a result of my sustained incoherence. All I need to know is that hostility and fear are active. And I know that I'm in sustained incoherence. I don't have to figure out the situation. I don't have to go, yeah, well, wait a minute, this time it's really true about them. If hostility or fear is moving in you and your construct, your perceptual construct is based in that, it's corrupt. That's all you need to know. You stop trying to figure it out there, step in and start to move into the inner work. Next step in number 1A, my denial causes my CBM, carbon-based memory, to displace my experience of myself, of my essence as love, and tells me the lie that my emotions are caused by my trigger. So once again, when I live in denial, I dissociate. And when I dissociate, my carbon-based memory, remember, this is all stored in these carbon molecules. And when resonance calls content out of carbon-based memory, it produces these projections. So that is going to tend to leave me stuck in believing something about myself that isn't true and telling me the lie that somebody else is the problem. Now, you'll notice on the worksheet that the words "my trigger" are bold, italic, and underlined. Must be something important about those words. We in this culture have been taught to ascribe cause to the person who triggers us. Now, if I believe that they are cause, I will never resolve the problem because I now have no access to cause. Let's use an example. Let's imagine that we bring a primitive from somewhere in the world. And we sit them, let's say we're in South Florida and we're on a canal where there's a drawbridge. And, this man's never seen anything more complex than a dugout canoe. They hacked down a tree, they hollowed it out and paddled away in their dugout canoe. Most complex thing he's ever seen. And what we're going to do is we're going to show him the bridge and we're going to ask him to see if he can figure out what causes the bridge to go up. Now, our friend sits there and watches, and the boat comes along, and when the boat comes along, the bridge goes up. He notices that. Boat goes away and the bridge goes down. He sits and he watches, and the boat comes along and the bridge goes up. The boat goes away and the bridge goes down. He watches for a week, and every time a boat comes along, the bridge goes up. And then when the boat goes away, the bridge goes down. And he goes, bingo, I know what causes bridges to go up. Boats. Now, do boats cause bridges to go up? It's in no way, shape, or form. Yes, the boat appearing on the horizon is the trigger. But the cause is there's a guy in the drawbridge that has a button that when he pushes it, when the boat arrives, flips a relay. The relay delivers power to a motor. The motor delivers torque to a gear, and the turning of that gear causes the bridge to go up. Now, if our friend from the jungles, if the assignment, if we say to him, look, you get whatever you want, the greatest reward you can imagine you're going to get if you can just stop the bridge from ever going up again. And he holds that boats cause bridges to go up. What does he have to do? He potentially has to at least change the direction of every boat in the world. It's got a lot of work to do. Now notice, if you believe that it's everybody else, you can spend a lot of time trying to change other people. Have you ever noticed how well that really works? It doesn't work at all. Now, if he knows the true cause of what causes a bridge to go up, he goes inside the bridge tower, he cuts one wire to the motor. That guy can boat, there can be a line of 1,000 boats, and he can push that button 1,000 times, but he just changed the cause of the bridge going up. He's going to get his reward. When you recognize the cause of pain in your life is disintegrative energy in your carbon-based memory, whether it came from your generations or from your own life experience or from the culture, when you realize that, then you can start to cut the wires to the pain. And guess what? Your physiology is the same design as every other human being. It's designed to be fueled by active love. In fact, if you go back and you listen to this, what people have presented as a theologian, he wasn't a theologian. He said what he came for. And do you remember what he said? Did he say, I come to bring you the best dogma in the world? I come to bring you the correct dogma. You know, we got 32,000 sects of so-called Christianity today. Which one of those do you suppose has got the right dogma? But you never notice, he never said, I come to bring you dogma. He said, I come to bring you life, and life more abundantly. The man knew what he was talking about. What is life? Best definition I've been able to come up with for life is love, present and flowing through a cell. Anything you do to inhibit love flowing through your cellular structure is death. It's moving in the direction of self-destruction. It's time for us to stop. It's time for us to reverse it, because the trajectory of this non-human world, and when I say non-human, I mean, if love is not active in what we call a human body, we don't have a human life. We have a human body, but we don't have a human life until love is active there. And so what we're looking to do is to remove what doesn't belong, what destroys, what inhibits life, and then what your physiology, I don't care how painful, how traumatic your world has been, how crazy it's been, how poverty-stricken it's been. When you do this and you restore love to your cellular structure, every cell in your structure is designed to function fueled by love. It is the power supply for human life. And when you begin to supply it with its power supply, life becomes an awesome journey. It doesn't matter what you've been carrying. And I could walk you through. I remember one year we were in Hawaii. We did a week of workshops at a Unity Center in Diamond Head. And when we completed that series of workshops, we were going to be around the islands for a few more weeks. And they said, gee, you know, this has been wonderful. Would you come back and do another weekly series, a week-long series? And that wasn't something we usually did, but Jeannie and I talked about it. And it's like, well, we're going into February. I'm going to have to stay an extra 2 weeks in Hawaii. Oh, okay, we'll do it. So we stayed in Hawaii. and did another series at the same center. He had 3 people that showed up that second week that told us that when they came early in January to hear us speak, they were planning their suicide. And all 3 of them had said, we're so happy we didn't kill ourselves because we realized what was going on. And now we've got the tools and we're recouping our human lives. We had 3 different people that said that. And, I've gotten letters from people over the years, many people who were wanting to end their lives and all of a sudden realized it's an inside job. Yes, the world complements it, but it's never caused by the outside world. So my trigger, my emotions, what's going on here are not caused by someone outside of me, though someone inside of me someone outside of me triggers what's inside of me. So now we're going to invite you to tell your story. My story, this whole challenge that I'm facing is that, and number 1C, that first blank, you want to fill in whoever you're going to do your worksheet on. So number 1C for Sally was the boss. This was a situation with the boss. And so we're going to invite you to fill in number 1C with whoever you're doing your worksheet on. Now, ultimately, you can do this worksheet process on any person, place, thing, or event, past, present, future, living or dead, including yourself. I'm inviting you to do something that involves another person, just so we're on the same page for instruction's sake, but you can use this on yourself just as readily. So she's doing a worksheet on her boss, and I suggest that you start with a small issue. Sometimes people hear this and go, wow, this is great. I've had this problem going on with this, my spouse for 45 years. I'm going to do that worksheet today. You're not going to do that worksheet today. You're not going to get through 45 years of drama and trauma you've been playing out, projection. It's not going to happen. But start with a small issue and just work through that small issue and build the brain cells for how this process works. And as you practice with it, work up to bigger and bigger issues. And yeah, you'll clean out some of the deepest traumas that you could possibly fathom any human being having as you build the strength to use it. So you've named the object of your attention, and then there's a blank for the story. What happened? And for her, it was the boss picks on me. So what's your story? Just very briefly, and put that in number 1C, the name of the object of attention of the worksheet, and a brief outline of what happened. And then you'll notice that there's a reminder to breathe. Literally, the veil of the temple is the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious. It is built by holding the breath. It is released by breathing. So we'll invite you to breathe. And then you'll see at the end of that sentence, there's a little hand that points over there that asks the question. And when you get to the point where you start asking yourself this question, you've hit a whole other level where things shift. And that is, if they're the one with the problem, why am I the one with the pain? You say, Bill made me so mad. He hurt me so much. Short of somebody punching you in the nose, nobody can hurt you. But if you've got hurt stored in there, man, I guarantee there's a whole procession of people going to show up that will appear to be able to hurt you as long as you're living in denial. When you realize that they're triggering the hurt you haven't resolved, then you thank them because they become the gift that shows you what you've been hiding from yourself and gives you the opportunity to work through it. So if they're the one with the problem, good question to ask yourself. Why am I the one with the pain? Obviously, if they're the one with the problem, they're the one with the pain. If I'm in pain, maybe I have a problem and I don't know it. What do we call that? Someone who has a problem and doesn't know it. Somebody who lives in denial, dissociation, and projection. It's all everybody else's fault. They're always the one whining and being victim, but it's all everybody else's fault. Number 1D. Before we go into number 1D, I'm going to ask you to just stop, put your pen down for a second. And I'm going to ask you to go through a mental exercise. What I'm going to do is ask you to close your eyes and go inside. I'm going to ask you to feel sadness. Allow yourself for a moment to just feel sadness. Notice where in your physiology you're feeling the sadness. Take a breath, let go of the sadness, and let yourself breathe in active present love. And then I'm going to ask you to allow yourself to feel anger. Let yourself for a moment feel anger. And notice where in your physiology you're feeling the anger. Take a breath, soften. Soften that place in your physiology where there's anger, and just allow yourself to breathe love into that space inside of you. And now, allow yourself to feel fear. Notice where in your physiology you're feeling the fear. Take a breath. Breathe love into that part of your physiology. And just allow that breath to move totally and completely through you. Now, I'm going to ask you to just notice what you did to feel each of those feelings. How did you go to the feeling of sadness? How did you go to the feeling of fear? How did you shift that to the feeling of anger? Again, we're not going to go through opening microphones, but from years of doing this, the answer is you had a thought. And when you changed your thought, your feeling changed. What does that make feelings? Feelings are shadows of thoughts. Whose thoughts make you feel? Only you. Only your thoughts can make you feel. Now, we live in a world that told us you made me angry, you made me sad, he made me afraid, she made me mad, and it's all a lie. The only thing that can cause you to feel is a thought. And here's my offering. The reason that's true is because we've been given a warning system. We are, remember I said we're creators, and we create. What did the opening words in John say? In the beginning was the Word, the mind energy, not the Word, and the mind energy became flesh. With your thoughts, you literally create the so-called chemistry in your body and the energetic patterns that unfold in your life. They gave us a warning signal. On creation, we were given a warning signal. If this is going on in you, your creation is going to turn on you. It's not going to be what you want. So you've got to start to change your thinking. You've got to start to change your mind, because mind energy becomes flesh, becomes chemistry, becomes feelings and physiology. Now, in this little 2-minute experiment, whose thought caused you to feel each of the things you felt? Well, obviously, Michael, it was mine. Well, if yesterday, last week, last month, last year, you had some form of turmoil or upset feelings, whose thought had to cause your feelings? God, I guess it was mine. If tomorrow, next month, next year, 10 years from now, you have some form of uncomfortable feelings, whose thoughts are going to be behind your feelings? How many expect to experience some sort of turmoil or pain in the future? And I ask you the question, why would you do that to yourself? There's a reason. You're insane. Our culture has been taught insane thought systems, and we need to correct it and return to the truth of who we are and return our minds to sanity and recognize that every time there is what we call a negative emotion, it's a feedback mechanism that tells us our creation is moving in an incorrect direction. You say, well, but I mean, anger really motivates me to do things. Yeah, it's also a drug. You know, people think of anger as an emotion. Anger isn't an emotion. Anger is a drug. It's an anesthetic. You watch people when they're in pain, the first thing they do is they start holding their breath. And when the breath is enough, they go to anger. And then when anger is enough, they reach for their pot or their fifth of scotch or their sugar or their junk food, whatever their drug of choice is. Anesthetics simply mean we go deeper into unconsciousness and we do more of the same to ourselves. It's time to wake up. It's time to recognize who we are. So number 1D, the truth is only my thoughts cause my emotional upset. And you want to breathe on that thought. The thoughts, and use a separate wake-up sheet for each thought, I use to cause the emotion I identified in number 1B. So here's D now, and what we're going to do is we're going to ask Sally, Sally, what's the thought that you cause your anger with? Oh, it's the thought that my boss is not going to honor me. Oh, so that's what's causing my pain? Yeah, you put that thought into physiology and it's going to reflect as some sort of anger. So what we're inviting you to do here is to look at the emotion you identified. In each worksheet that you do in the future, look at the emotion you identified and then own it. Look at the thought you're thinking to produce that. Now, why did we suggest a different worksheet for each emotion? Well, let's look at this one over here on fear. What if we did the worksheet, the same worksheet with the boss on fear, what she touches into with fear is, oh, the boss is going to hurt me. Now, the boss has never touched her, the boss has never hurt her, but that's the thought she uses to create fear around her boss. Now, that worksheet's probably going to open up and she's going to go back and start to experience something to do with maybe dad, maybe an older brother, whatever. But I'm never in pain or trauma for the reason my perceptual construct tells me. I'm in pain or trauma because there is a disintegrative energy. Again, remember the word sin in Aramaic just means off the mark. If I put an off the mark energy in, my system's warning me that I'm destroying myself. That's what these emotions are for. They're to warn us about the quality of our creative process. So we've looked at what the thought is behind the feeling. And if you're doing 5 different worksheets around an issue, you'd have 5 different feelings, 5 different worksheets, and 5 different thoughts. Then number 1E, I want to punish. So Sally, what's your punishment thought? What is it that you want to do to the boss? So I want to punish number 1C. And what you want to do? I want to yell at him. And what's your punishment about yourself? And this was an interesting one because it actually also was a punishment toward the boss and herself. And it was, I want to quit my job. She needed the job and the boss needed the employee. So she was going to punish both of them by quitting. So you just acknowledge what your punishment thought is here. And, you know, oftentimes people will say, well, I don't ever want to punish anybody. I just don't ever want to see them again. Well, leaving people is one of the worst punishments you can ever do to somebody. So stop pretending there's no punishment in that. So now we've worked our way through step 1. And actually, I missed a piece there. You'll notice that right under number 1B, where you identified your emotions, there's a place to draw your emotions. So go back. Sometimes our emotions are pre-verbal. There aren't words for them. And so a line drawing can be very useful. So just draw your emotion there. It'll take a moment for you to do that. My apology for skipping that piece of the puzzle. And then recognize if I'm in pain, my thinking's in error. Pain is a result of holding on to an energy that doesn't belong in the system. The first subtlest levels of pain is when I introduce mind energy that doesn't belong. If I ignore that, then I'll tend to go into deeper and deeper reasons for it until I pull somebody in, cancel the thought that's going to want to punch me in the nose. I'm a creator, remember. If somebody wants to show up and punch me in the nose, I've set the frequency up. I've set the energetic pattern to resonate them into my life. I'm not independent of what happens in my world. Now, number 2. So anything based in hostility or fear that the mind tells you is a lie, it's a fraud. And most people love their lies. In fact, most people live in a state of blockage of truth. They lock out truth. They don't want anything to do with the truth. They live in a world of, we've seen it come up, alternative facts, and there's no amount of evidence you can show them that's any different because their mind is already made up. So number two, I want to shift this, and I'm ready to honor truth. So number two, I choose to honor truth. And what happens when people live in blockage of truth and somebody shows up that carries the truth, their stress level goes up. A person who's in blockage of truth that's shown truth has their stress level go up. Most people have that increased stress attached to getting rid of the source of the information that they don't want to look at. What we suggest is that you rewire your mind, and if truth shows up and you go into stress, you rewire it so instead of trying to get rid of the information, and this is, I'd offer what all divorce, all attack, all war is made of, is that desire to get rid of what's showing us truth. And when I rewire my mind to, oh, if my stress goes up when truth shows up or information shows up, I go into increased stress. I go inside and I correct the root of the stress, and I alleviate myself of that stress. And then, second part of number two, I willingly face and process out all disease-producing energies from all of my relations. Now, that term, all of my relations, actually comes from a Native American healing understanding. If you've ever been to a Native American sweat or a healing ceremony, you'll notice that what the Native American says entering a healing ceremony is the words Mitakuye. Mitakuye basically means for all of my relations. I realize I'm not just doing this for me. When I go in and I clean something up, I'm alleviating those who perhaps have been dead hundreds of years of the energetic burden that their being is still carrying. That's what the truth was about, where they talked about praying for the dearly departed. This is how you clean up the lives for the dearly departed. For those who are dead and are carrying this energetic burden in their being, having left their bodies, this is the gift you can give to them, to your generations, of cleaning it up. And again, there's a checkbox there, confirm. Okay, I'm willing to embrace those energies and clean them out. And then number two, to B, I willingly go through the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of healing. Now, one of the reasons why actual healing is not very popular is because it's not Dr. Feelgood. When you bring a disintegrative energy into this tissue structure, tissue goes into trauma, it goes into pain. There are symptoms associated with that disintegrative energy entering the energy system. Now, if we live in denial, dissociation, use our fifth of scotch or our sugar or our caffeine or whatever it is to shut that down, it's interesting. One of the most popular drugs in the culture is caffeine. And, it's an acceptable, everybody's doing it. Go to YouTube and put in a search term, coffee, ABC, MRI. And you'll come up with a video where, and I believe it was ABC, it might have been NBC, but whichever one it was, it'll show up if you put those terms in. There's a woman reporter working for a TV station to take her camera crew into a doctor's office. And they do an MRI on her. And then, this is before her morning cup of coffee. Then she has a cup of coffee. They do another MRI on her. Guess what? When you show the MRI, the blood flow to the brain in the second MRI after one cup of coffee has been reduced by 40%. It's a drug that stops people from feeling and experiencing what's going on. And our culture is littered with drugs. You'll notice that we now are getting, under the auspices of a guy who was the Speaker of the House at one time, he's making billions of dollars by making the brain destroying pot legal, state after state after state. He's one of the movers and shakers behind it. It's time for us to wake up to what we're doing. It's time for us to realize that every drug we use has a cost. And the cost is it robs us of our vitality. It locks in disintegrative energy. And the locking in of disintegrative energy means degeneration. It's literally how we kill ourselves. And I'd offer that all death is suicide. So I'm willing to go through the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of healing. I'm willing to embrace everything from my generations. So when I start doing my work and I start taking the lid off and I start throwing away the drugs, those symptoms, as that energy that I've been hiding from myself, I start to access and it starts to move out of the system. On the way out, the symptoms are going to be identical to the symptoms that occurred when that energy was going into the structure. So on a physical level, healing looks like any kind of physical symptom you've ever had and low energy. On a mental level, healing looks like any kind of negative thought you've ever had and confusion. On an emotional level, healing looks like any kind of negative feeling you've ever had and depression. Willingness is the cosmic grease. When I start breathing, when I start becoming more vital and access what doesn't belong, I start to process out what doesn't belong. I'm willing to go through the symptoms of healing. Now, when people start to do this work, the people I've heard from that say, well, you know, I haven't even had a cold in 15 years. Are you eating the SAD diet? Are you drugging yourself daily? Well, do you know why you haven't had a cold in 15 years? Because your body hasn't been vital enough to throw off the crap you've been putting in it. A cold is not, you notice all the research, they're not one step closer to curing the common cold because they're never going to cure the common cold because the common cold is not a disease. The common cold is a structure vital enough to say, I've got some junk in here and I need to throw it up, and it's going to start to move. I'm willing to go through the symptoms of healing. Now, if I'm drugging myself at every turn, if I live in hostility or fear, I'm in the blame game with everybody, I'm driving my vitality down to the point where there's going to come a point where it'll physiologically kill me. The body-mind unit has a built-in suppress mechanism. Let's imagine that I have a level 7 toxin, and we've got a meter that goes from 1 to 10 of vitality, and I'm at a level 5 vitality. If I'm at level 5 vitality and I have a level 7 toxin, my body-mind unit is not going to yield up that level 7 toxin for release and detox, because to release it could mean it would kill me. So as I begin to do my work, I hit new levels of vitality. Gee, I let go of that load, I get stronger. I'm eating better. I'm doing, we do intensives, and in our intensives, we do a total fresh and raw dietary program at our teaching center in the Ozarks in Southern Missouri. Not open right now because of COVID. We are doing online intensives, and we do offer people support for a total fresh and raw program if they want to change their dietary regimen to build vitality. But let's take somebody who's at level 5 and they go, yeah, well, I want to work out that old anger thing that I have with my spouse, but I just can't do it. I want to get rid of that, but give me my 5th of scotch, let me have a little junk food. Hey, I got to have 3 cups of coffee in the morning to get the motor going. That keeps the vitality down there at a 5. If I start doing the right thing, I'm going to build to a level 6. If I keep doing the right things, I'm going to get to a level 7. Guess what happens when I get to a level 7.5 vitality? All hell breaks loose. The body-mind unit says, hey, remember that old level 7 toxicity we had in here from 30 years ago? We couldn't handle it. We're level 7.5. We can do it now. And that starts to break loose physically, mentally, emotionally. I'm willing to go through the symptoms of healing. You got to step into that willingness, because if you've been loading yourself for a long time, you're going to be a long time going through the symptoms of cleaning it up. And that's just part of the process. Willingness is the cosmic grease. Number 3. Now, you'll notice, unless you're just a generally miserable person, you're pretty happy with everybody in your world as long as they're doing everything you want them to do. Notice the only time you go into hostility or rage or fear is when they're not fulfilling a goal that you hold for them. This is the key way into forgiveness. This is how forgiveness was taught 2,000 years ago. And it has nothing to do with me letting you off the hook because of what's moving in me. It's got to do with me opening up and removing, letting loose, facing and dealing with what's in me and removing it from my structure. Again, notice you never pour your upset on somebody, again, unless you're a generally miserable person, unless they're not fulfilling a goal that you hold for them. Well, so what's that got to do with anything, Michael? Well, here it is. Remember we said that Harvard research, and this is actually the most quoted research in psychology in all of history. This goes way back into the 50s. 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity, 9 bits of data in conscious awareness. Obviously, something must determine which 9 bits of data out of the 10,000 the mind is going to use to build your perception. Something has to filter it. Something has to determine which 9 bits of data are going to be used. Guess what it is? It's your goals. Your goal is the driver for perception. It's what causes your mind to construct the world you think you see out there that is really nothing but a product of what's going on inside of you. It's the driver for this construct called perception. That's what runs the game. Again, notice you never have a perceptual construct of rage toward anybody unless they're not doing what you want them to do. Pretty happy with them. But then when they're not fulfilling the goal you hold for them, that's when you pour your rage or your hatred or your fear or your whatever it is on them. This is the key to forgiveness in Aramaic. Tell me where you found that piece of information on the planet. It doesn't exist. I spent 35 years before I could, I've taught canceling of goals. That's what we're going to get to. In the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag. It literally translates to cancel. I've taught the canceling of goals for 40 years. And the first 35 years, I didn't know why or how it worked. I just knew it worked. It took me that long to understand all of these dynamics of projection and perception and drivers and constructs. That's what it took me to understand this. Every time you load a goal for someone, yourself or someone else, that they refuse to achieve for you, if the file in your mind related to that goal holds hostility or fear, then you're going to use hostility or fear to build your brain's image of them, and you will be the one with the problem. So the next step will unfold how this all works. The next step is, number 3, what's the goal? So number 3, my desire, the constructive result, the exact goal that drives my pained perception is that 1C, my trigger. So in this case with Sally, number 3, she wants something from the boss. So what does she want from the boss? I want the boss to honor me. That's her constructive result. Now, let's say that she also lives in a world where her perception is that her boss abuses her. She might make the mistake of putting abuse me in here. And then she'll say her goal will be what she doesn't want. Most of the world is working with what they don't want. You ask the average person that's in conflict in a relationship or moving on to a new relationship, and what do they say? Well, I don't want somebody who's going to abuse me. I don't want somebody who's going to come out late. I don't want somebody that drinks. I don't want somebody that pushes over my kids. All about what they don't want. And every frequency they engage in, they're creating in their lives and have no idea that they're the ones that are setting it up. When I say I don't want somebody who'll abuse me on an energetic level, remember Marcel Vogel's camera we talked about? Here's what the high energy wave would be from that person's mind. Hey world, is there anybody out there who knows how to abuse me? I'm ready for another relationship. Of the million people they could interact with, guess who's going to resonate with that? The person who knows exactly how to abuse them, exactly the way they've always been abused, and they're going to rush right in and they're going to fall in love. And it's not going to be long before the honeymoon is over. And guess what? They're going to be asking the question, why is this happening to me again? Why are they doing this to me again? Why is every relationship the same? Guess what? No two relationships have ever been the same. But as long as you're living and thinking this picture in your mind is the person you're in relationship with, and you never change the source of that picture in your mind, every relationship's going to be the same. Because there's no such thing as a body. When you look in your mind and you see a body, you're looking at a picture generated by your mind. If you could see that person who's actually standing in front of you, you see this whirring mass of electrons, protons, neutrons, and light, you would not see a body. There is no world of bodies. That's an appearance. Yeshua said, don't judge by appearances. Collapse the appearance. Collapse this picture in your mind. Access the underlying traumatic experience that's there, bring it forward in your mind to the presence of love, and guess what? You dissolve the pain. And it's the dissolution of that sin energy, that energy that's off the mark, that is forgiveness. So the first step is to identify what it is, specifically and precisely. What's the goal that you hold? The constructive result. What's the if I could look at that situation, here I am, I'm 50 years old, and I'm going to do a worksheet on something that happened when I was 5 with my mother. And I'm looking at it, gee, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. Okay, so think about the situation. If you were to describe the ideal outcome, well, instead of yelling at me, if she'd come over to me and just put her arms around me and explain what happened, that would have been cool. That's my goal. Got a conflict going on with your spouse and you're not sure what it is you want? If you were to say to your spouse, what's the ideal result? What is it that I want? That's the goal. That's step 3 in the process. And breathe. You notice at the end of the sentence, it's a reminder to breathe. Step 4, I want to tap in, and now I'm going to bring active present love forward. I've laid out the whole scenario, the problem that's behind this perceptual construct. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the healer. I choose love, my essence, which stirs the love in everyone involved. So now, having looked at all this and taking responsibility for it, I want to develop a new habit. I want to develop a new skill, and you'll have to cultivate this skill. And that is, I'm going to tap into the presence of my being love. And I'm going to bring it forward into this space. And I would suggest that every morning before you get out of bed, you take at least a couple of minutes and you breathe and you cultivate your connection to and your relationship with the truth of who you are as love. Spend time with that so that this becomes first nature, to just go to that space of active present love. It is your nature. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are considered by the family to be the black sheep and the outcast and the most awful person ever. The truth about you is this is who you are. You are active present love. Your spouse, your children, your parents. Oh, my parents were so evil. No. If your parents were evil, guess what? They were pained. They were traumatized. And guess what? You're probably playing out the same drama and trauma because you were pained and traumatized in that relationship. There's actually a video on our YouTube channel called Honor Thy Father and Thy Mother. It's the most brilliant idea ever given to man. You see, because often, mainly our power person was mom or dad. And if they were terrible people, then I have all kinds of trauma in here. And when I choose to honor them, and that is when I choose to bring love into behavior toward them, guess what? I have to pass it through the part of me that holds pain from my relationship with them. And I get to heal by doing that. This is about how you heal yourself. It's not about some theological nicey-nice. It's the most practical step you could take in healing yourself. If your parents were vicious and nasty and you have all kinds of pain from it, you need to honor them. You need to learn to come from a space of active love and put it into your behavior to them. And when you do, it passes through the part of you that's holding that pain, and you get to heal. You say, but they don't deserve it. And that's right. Maybe they don't, but you do. You deserve to function out of who you are. And once you start doing that, then you're going to start to, with compassion, realize, oh, I passed this pain on because I didn't know how to do that. Gee, maybe they just did the same thing. And with compassion, you'll step into a whole different level of family healing, and everything starts to shift and change. So I'm going to bring this presence of love into the space. There's a story that I like to tell called The Rose and the Butterfly. You'll see at the end of this sentence. And let's imagine we've got a rose and butterfly. The rose and butterfly meet. They fall in love. They have a wonderful time together. But one day, the butterfly up and flies away. The rose, knowing that the love of the butterfly is the most important thing in its life, and the rose uproots itself to give chase, what's going to happen to the rose? It's going to die. Why does it die? Because it made something more important than being connected to its source. If you make anything more important than staying connected to the truth of who you are, you're going to die. And it will be suicide. We're not designed to die. Energy systems can't die. My background's in physics. Here's what I know. Energy is eternal, and it is the only thing that exists. If the only thing that exists is energy and it's eternal, you and I must be eternal. Why don't we expect to be eternal? Because we've been taught to sin. We've been taught to engage in hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, and we kill ourselves by doing that. It's time to stop. It's time to own and clean up this energy system. It's been going on for a long time. Remember the Native Americans? They were pretty smart. Matakwyasin for all my relations, all of them. Bring them in the circle of active present love and watch what happens to your world. Now we come to the core of the forgiveness process, number 5. And basically, we're going to review the whole first half of the workshop with these 2 statements. When upset, my perception is built out of corrupt data driven by my goal, number 3. It is a limiting structure constructed from a max of 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing. By canceling my goal, now remember in the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag or shabak, it means to cancel. By canceling my goal, my replicate mind's reality collapses and gives me direct contact with the denied and dissociated parts of my carbon-based memory, which projects and blames others for its content. So the core of forgiveness in Aramaic is you identify specifically and precisely the goal that's driving the pained perception, and you cancel it. Now, Sally says, well, wait a minute, Michael, all I want is for my boss to honor me. There's nothing wrong with that goal. It'd be stupid for me to cancel that. Why would I cancel that? I deserve to be honored. I agree with you, Sally. Why aren't you being honored? Is there a part of you that doesn't believe you deserve it? You can't have it? So here's the key way into healing it. You're not canceling the goal for the boss to honor you because you're stupid. You're not canceling because there's anything wrong with it. It's a perfectly good goal. Everybody should have that goal for everybody all the time, unless they're in pain. You're canceling that goal because you've recognized that when you load that goal into your mind, it accesses your trauma. It accesses your hostility and fear. And you end up in hostility or fear because you hold that goal for the boss. The boss may have totally and completely honored you, but you're in such projection, you blocked it and you have no idea that it's there. So again, you don't cancel the goal because there's anything wrong with the goal. It's a perfectly good goal. You cancel it because you recognize that it accesses and brings into perception your pain, your unresolved hostility or fear. So what I'm looking to do is to get in touch with these denied and dissociated parts of my own structure. Now here's the action step in 5A, pardon me. While holding love conscious, active, and present, I now choose to collapse my mind's lies by willingly canceling my goal for number 1C. And so down here at number 5, you bring your answer from number 3 precisely as it is in number 3. So I'm bringing the goal for the boss to honor me down to number 5, and I'm going to cancel my need for it. Now, again, I'm not canceling my need because there's anything wrong with the goal. I'm canceling my need because I recognize that whenever I put that one in my mind, there's a file in my mind on being honored that's got pain in it, and I need to clean it up. Otherwise, every time I go near anything about being honored, I'm going to be in pain. And I'm going to draw people to play that pain out with me. Now that's step 5A. And you'll notice there's a little hand that points over there that says breathe. And then we're going to go up to the box just at the end of, or above number 3. And we're going to work with verbal release. Most trauma is introduced to the human energy system through words, through language. And so verbal release is a powerful way to start to move things out. And we're going to look at, there's another goal to be canceled here yet. So verbal release, we're going to take everything in number 1, A, B, C, D, and E, and take each one of them and do a surrender statement to love. So number 1, I release and surrender. Looking at the box just above number 3 at on the right-hand side, I release and surrender myself. So number 1A was myself. I release to love. I release and surrender my emotions, my fear, my hostility to love. I release and surrender the object of this worksheet, the boss, to love. I release and surrender the story that the boss is not gonna honor me, to love. I release and surrender the thought that I don't deserve love. I release and surrender my punishment that I'm gonna yell or quit. So I'm releasing all of that to love. And then you'll see there's a hand that points over to another piece in each worksheet to be canceled. This perceptual structure is a habit-built structure, been going on for generations. And so once you cancel a goal, you also want to do this second canceling, and that is, I cancel my need to be right. Boy, everybody wants to be right about it's the boss's fault. Excuse me, you did this, you've had 5 different bosses, and how many of them? You've had 3 of them have done this with you? It's not about the boss. So I cancel my need to be right and make up another story out of these brain cells to hallucinate proof that my hostility or fear-based story, my reality is true. So somebody will, if they don't do this additional step, they'll get through something and go, yeah, that feels better. But those old brain cells are still there, and it's really easy to resurrect them and go back to the same old game with somebody else, or maybe with the same person. So I'm handling that by recognizing, I'm going to cancel the need to be right about this. Yeah, I've been blaming the boss for a long time, but I've been through this one too many times, and I recognize it's mine. And breathe. Now, if you start recognizing that you've got generations and generations and generations in here and a whole lifetime of things stored, and you've got a 9-bit processor, 9 bits out of 10,000. We're going to call this conscious space up here a 9-bit processor, not meaning that absolutely literally, but knowing that on a conscious level, we get to process the tiniest bits of data compared to what's going on in the unconscious. You talk to the average psychologist and they'll tell you that as much as 90, 95, perhaps 98% of our thought processes are unconscious. If I've got a 9-bit processor, how am I ever going to clean all of this up? It's not going to happen. But what Yeshua taught 2,000 years ago is that there was a feminine elemental force inside of us that when we invited her into activity would undo the effects of our errors and teach us the truth. In Aramaic, it was called Ruka Dekucha. The words were translated by the Greek as the Holy Spirit. There's nothing in there about a disembodied spirit being. It literally speaks of a feminine elemental force in us. We could almost say, in our modern computer language, it's like there's a super processor in there. We've got a 9-bit processor. It's going to take a long time to work through all of that, but there's a super processor in there that if we'll soften and breathe and open, will move things in massive ways that our minds alone could never do. So 5B is where you invite that power to go to work in you. So I invite, and there's a blank there for what you choose to call it. In the, say, in AA programs, it's been called the higher power, the superconscious, the subconscious, the primordial X. In Aramaic, you'll see the words are there, Ruka de Kudsha. A feminine elemental force, definitions down below, that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. I just short form it to Ruka. And there's several things we suggest you ask for. I ask for that power to incline me toward healing, to shift my mind out of the hostility and fear game, and just, each day, I may request, incline my behavior toward that which will bring me healing. Restore me to my newborn essence, love. I want to be restored to the truth of who I am. I'm asking that power to heal my denial. Checkbox on each one of them. And my capacity to generate the emotion up here in number 1B. So for Sally, it's going to be to forgive, to help her to remove literally the capacity to even generate anger. And help me open a direct conscious relationship with and gently remove the denied, dissociated, and projected parts of my carbon-based memory. So there's several things I'm asking this power to do. So I'm setting the stage by canceling the goal. What happens when I cancel the goal is the driver removed, the perception that I take this data and build my brain's image of them collapses. When it collapses, it opens a pathway. It's not a very nice image, but it's a powerful one that approximates this. We all remember what happened with the 9/11 towers. They dropped into their own footprint at free fall speed. When you cancel the goal, your perception collapses into its own footprint at free fall speed. And that means you get to access what underlies it. You've gone from conscious projection to the unconscious dynamic, and you start to bring that forward. And as you breathe, that energy starts to process and move. So you set the stage by canceling the goal, collapsing this thing in on itself, and now you've got access to the underlying dynamics. So that's what I'm asking this power to do. So whatever your worksheet is, I ask you to go ahead and cancel the goal that you identified in number 5, or number 3, please. Bring it down to number 5. I cancel and I invite. And then in number 6, as you do that, how does it feel? What's happening for you? How does it feel? And 5B, about number 1, I see that. Over the years in doing this process with people, most people look back at this thing that was such a big deal when they started the worksheet, and literally an hour later, they look at it and they're kind of like, why was that ever such a big deal? I mean, they literally process so much of the trauma energy. I mean, this may have been going on in their lives for years. And again, the most common thing I hear from people is, why was I ever upset about that? Well, you were upset because there was all this unresolved trauma you were holding on to. And when you do this process, you get to process through that. And in this work, I define processing as the ability to hold love conscious, active, and present when something less than love comes up. Processing. The ability to hold love conscious, active, and present when something less than love comes up. And what is it in us that has to come up that's less than love? Literally, all of the generations are clamoring to come through and have that stuff cleaned up. So I now feel, and about 1 can see that. And then you want to look at, because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, there's a lot of projection in the perception of everyone. I asked to be shown a time when I've not fulfilled number 3. So Sally, we're going to suggest that Sally, down here in number 6, that 6C, when did you not honor yourself or someone else? And when you look at that and you start to breathe into that, that will open for most people a whole other level of processing and healing. And again, processing is the ability to hold love conscious, active, and present when something less than love comes up. So how about doing that and breathe? Document how you feel. Document what the situation number 1 looks like. And then take a look at a time when you didn't fulfill that goal for yourself, or you didn't honor yourself, or you didn't honor someone else. And now Having done that, draw your feelings in this box. Compare it to the box up above. If you do a line drawing of it, what's it look like? And then we suggest kind of a purpose statement here and another piece of work. It's kind of like, you know, you've got the ball rolling down the hill, you want to keep it going. So as you draw that in that second box on the right-hand side toward the bottom, I commit to love, to living a human life. Checkbox, I'm going to affirm that. To help achieve this, I do a mass canceling of all the times I wanted number 3 from someone. Now, for most people, when they're working with some of the bigger issues in their lives, when they look at that goal, it's such a repeating, it's gone on and on and on through their whole lives. So you've kind of got the floodgates open and the content is open in the pathway for that to move. So now you want to just put the initials and mentally cancel the goal for everybody you've ever held that goal for. So it might be, you know, for that first girlfriend or boyfriend, it might be for, you know, a spouse, it might be for a boss, it might be for a mother, father. Every person you've ever held that for, just jot their initials in and just cancel the goal. I cancel my need for, you know, that first girlfriend, that first boyfriend to have honored me. I cancel the need for that teacher in grade 5 to have honored me. I cancel the need for that boss to have honored me. And just breathe and just let that energy move. Just put the initials of each person you've ever held that goal for. And then the final step in the process, number 7, a principle of the universe is that by giving, I first get the original. I'm grateful. So gratitude, stepping into gratitude, like, wow. Yeah, this person's been the bane of my existence, and now I realize they've been knocking on my door for years to give me the opportunity to forgive this trauma in me. I'm grateful. I'm going to step into gratitude. Thanks for showing it to me. So instead of the blame game, look what you've done to me, it becomes, I didn't know this was even in me. Thank you for showing it to me. And gratitude moves energy on a whole other level. It's powerful. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to heal. Now, instead of my lies, I'm coming back to the statement in step 2. Remember, number 1A or number 1 throughout, based in some form of hostility or fear, is always a lie. It's always from corrupt data. So I'm reaffirming here now in number 7 that I choose truth, checkbox, and perfect love. It's interesting, in the Aramaic language, they said perfect love casts out fear. What they were talking about, without getting into a lot of details, we could spend 2 hours on this topic. In Aramaic, there are words for 2 different filters in the mind. One of them you'll see on the right-hand side of the page, just across from number 5B. It says Rachma, a filter, a gateway over the frontal lobes of the brain that open a space for love to enter. So Rachma is this filter. If you go back to the Aramaic, we're told, this man Yeshua told us to love our neighbor. He never said any such thing. That's just a total fraud. Never said it. They said, what's most important in the law? He didn't say love your neighbor, love God as yourself. What he said was have Rachma when you think of neighbor, when you think of creator, and by so doing, you maintain self. This is how you get to keep your human life. It's a gateway, and the word represents a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain through which love enters the human form. It's literally a gateway, and it is closed down by hostility or fear. You don't get to have a human life present in what we call a human body until love is active there. That's not human if there isn't love present there. So perfect love, I'm asking to move in that direction. So I choose truth and perfect love. And now I'm going to select a goal based in love around the issue for this. For Sally, it's going to be around being honored. I'm going to select a goal that I'm willing to offer to the person I identified in number 1C, the object of this worksheet. So number 1C, so in this case, it would be Sally speaking to the boss. Based on number 3, this issue of being honored, I'm going to structure a goal toward you. And every time I think of you, I promise to connect to active love and extend that love in your direction. Now, your mind may say, well, they don't deserve that. They're such a rotten. Okay, that's your hostility. That's your next worksheet. start doing. What I'm going to invite everybody to do is to consider if this makes sense to you. Tomorrow, the next day, this probably isn't going to make a lot of sense to you. This is a giant new piece of information for most people. Most people will start to understand it and recognize it after the 10th or the 15th or the 20th or the 30th hearing. So, but at this moment, with me standing up here firing the brain cells, your mind's able to construct the reasonable construct of, yeah, this makes sense, man. Boy, I can't say that. Yeah, I'm doing that. That's good. But tomorrow morning, if you go back and look at this worksheet and try to figure it out, it's probably not going to make a lot of sense. So if it's making sense now, here's my invitation. Make a commitment to do it. That's what will make it make sense. I'm going to suggest and invite you to do 5 worksheets a day for the next 40 days. Remember, the code word for the unconscious is the desert. You spend 40 days tapping into your own unconscious dynamics, your own desert, your life will never be the same, I promise you. Take the tool, put it to work in your life, and watch what happens. And then the last instruction on the page, and number 7, is to soften and breathe. And that's our workshop on forgiveness. That's first century Aramaic forgiveness. That's how it's done.
That's it?
I don't even know where to start. So what I'm going to invite you to do is start with the next situation where you've got some form of hostility or fear, recognize the goal that's driving it, and start to clean it up. That's how you remove it from yourself. Our workshop is truly offered free. I'm delighted you're here. Take it, use it, pass it on. Download the app. Just type in Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. You can do this right on your phone. You can send us questions. We'll answer those questions and get the answers back to you. We're here to support you 100%. Call the radio show 5 days a week from 1 till 2 o'clock, 563-999-3581. We'll be delighted to hear from you. We'll be delighted to support you. Put the tools to work. If this makes sense and if it fits for you and you are inclined to support it, we do the work we do. Jean and I have traveled for over 40 years. Actually, we've only been together 18, but I've traveled for the 40 years. And we've paid our own expenses and we do our workshops free. And the reason for that is not because we're independently wealthy. It's free, but we haven't figured out how to do it for nothing. If you've gotten something out of this, if it supports you, then consider donating to support us. You'll see a link on the flyer, or you can go to our website, WhyAgain.org. Down at the bottom of the page, there's a donate button. And that's a big conditional request. If you're in a position to do that, if this is supporting you and you see value, our commitment is to make it available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet and beyond a very meager lifestyle. Everything that comes into this work we use to pass on to the rest of the planet. And so thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn this back over to young Master Tim.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryce. So you all see now why this is such a big deal, and if this is your first experience with Dr. Ryce, obviously stay connected with him, and what he's teaching is extremely profound. So Dr. Ryce, personally, I can't thank you enough. I hope you realize the respect that I have for you and that I've always had for you since I've known you. And every time I hear this conversation, which I have heard for 15 years now, and this conversation has never changed. It's the same exact thing he said for 15 years. And the people that he's brought through this have seen amazing changes in their personal lives and their relationships. And the funny thing about what you're talking about, Dr. Ryce, is this is life-changing stuff. This is what we're doing. This changes people's lives. And people have
to changes their generations.
You are erasing generations of crap that's been built up that you are bringing, you're giving to your children. I always use the children as the 2x4 when I work with people. If you don't do this, your kids will inherit this, and then they will turn around and give it to their kids. And you have to understand, I love my son more than life itself. I do not want to give my son things that he has to take with him into adulthood. And so when you understand that, that's really the key here, and why Dr. Ryce is doing this, is so we can finally stop this generational crap that's been handed to us, and that we're going to hand to our children unconsciously if we don't deal with it.
Time to put an end to it. Yesterday, my granddaughter is 3.5, and she's really into anatomy and physiology. She'll sit in front of YouTube and watch a college level YouTube video for 45 minutes, totally glued to it. last night she asked to watch a video on the body, and we sat for 30 minutes, and she was just right there with it. But we were watching one of the videos that she likes on YouTube is from the Children's Learning Channel, and they have all the body parts that they have the body, and the body parts fall out on the ground, and they go by size, and each body part sings and tells what it's for. And so yesterday we were watching this, and the second thing, they start out with the pituitary gland, and then they go the eyes, and the eyes are there, and they show where the eyes are in the skull, and they start to sing and say, I am your eyes, I am your eyes, I see the world around you. My granddaughter goes, they just don't understand. We don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain. It changes everything. It changes everything. And again, we're here to support you. Call the radio show with any question every time you have a question. Download the app, ask the questions. We'll answer them on the radio show.
I have always liked to say that you live your life in your mind. And I think what you basically have done for us today is describe that in infinite detail. And the other thing is, I always talk about the biggest thing that you heard today is Dr. Ryce said, it's maybe you, not the other person. And that is the first step in you taking this journey in forgiveness and figuring out who you are. So again, Dr. Ryce, thank you very much for your time. And I hope everybody else appreciated this as well. So with that being said, any last thoughts before I disconnect the room?
On the 20th, you and I are doing another conversation, right?
Yeah.
What time is that going to be? Do you know?
You and I will select it, and we'll post it in the group.
Okay, yeah. And also you can join if you go under events on our website. The second and fourth Thursday of every month, we're doing the at 3:30 in the afternoon, 8:30 London time, the Hear My Voice book club study, working with the book. And by the way, my book's out of print. I can't sell you one, but you can go to Amazon or eBay. There are always used copies there, or you can go to my website and you can download the book free. So download it, put it to use, and we're glad to answer questions. Thank you for being here and your kind attention.
Thank you, guys, and enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll hope to talk to you guys soon.
All right, blessings. Bye-bye.
All right, blessings, everybody.